All right, so I'll have the math recording. I think what I'll do for people who want the grammar recording is I'll share the one from last year because we went over the same concepts. We just won't have the thing. But since I'm recording, I'll share this complicated list because I didn't go over this last year. So we have this complicated list to look at. Yay. Okay. So now you have all these random math tips. I was gonna have you guess them, but you won't need to guess them. In mind here. So these are the biggest mistakes that students make when they are doing this section. So we will go look at some of the things that we can do to avoid those mistakes. So for example, tip number one is being careful with negative numbers, right? So what are some ways you think we could do number 18 better if not, since we're not gonna worry about doing any math by hand, we should be doing minimal math by hand today. Plug it into the calculator, right? And remember when you plug stuff into your calculator, you're gonna use negatives, or you're gonna use parentheses to plug something in. Or there's this really interesting function that you can do if you want to, and you can store numbers too. So for example, it's saying let f equal negative, x equal -4 here, right? So if I want to do store, you should all have a stow button right above your on. Yeah, there's a stow button right there. So I'm going to do -4 stow, right? And I'm going to plug in for x. So then I press enter. Now it says -4. That means I've stored it in for x. So now I can plug in the question exactly as it's written on the paper. So -4 x cubed minus 4x squared, right? And so if I've done that, right, I've written it exactly as it on paper, and then I hit enter, and it's 192. Okay, so for simple arithmetic, please be careful. Okay, I don't want you to make dumb mistakes because they add up really quickly. Okay, same with something like this. If you really want to plug in numbers for A, B, and C, you can, but just remember to distribute your negatives across parentheses, right? Okay, so that's how we do that one. Tip number two. So tip number two we have is foiling, right? People forget to FOIL wrong. So what do people say erroneously for like number 33 then? If they square it, they'll be like, oh, it's I squared plus 1, right? That's not how we do it. We would FOIL it out. However, we're not doing any math right now. So how do we do it with our calculator? Yep, so parentheses, right? Your I button is this thing above the period, right? So second, period, I minus, oops, I have to look at it. I minus 1 quantity squared. I plug that in. There you go. My answer is -2i. So then similarly for number 9, right? We can plug in a number for x, right? So n here. What do we want n to be? 2. Okay, so n is 2, right? So we can do it by hand, or we can do the same thing. I'm going to do 2 stow x, right? So I'm going to plug in 2 for x. And then it says, which of the following represents the area? I think everybody knows area right now is base times height, right? So I just plugged in base times height. Enter. My area would be 48 then, right? And then I just go through all my answers and see which one's equal to 48. Remember, if you're going to do this technique, though, you might accidentally get 2 answers that get 48. There is a small chance, so don't always just stop after you get the first answer that matches, right? 4x minus 4 didn't work. 4x squared minus 4 doesn't work either, right? So this is a great way for you to check your work if you're not super confident in your arithmetic. 24, right? And then for those of you who don't want to keep plugging things in, you can always scroll up and then highlight and hit enter, so you can just replace it and just plug in the next set of values. 32. Wait, none of them equaled 48, right? So then I know it's the last one. What was the answer to number 18 again? The answer to number 18 was J, 192. Questions on how we plug in numbers? You plug in numbers when you see answers in the choices and the answers, right? In the question and in the answers.
You store it by like putting it into alpha, right? Alpha, and then like the
Yeah, you can pick letters too. Yeah. So there's alpha, right? Alpha, and then you get any of the green letters, right? So if I want to do O, I could use the letter O, or I could do alpha A, or you can just replace the B, replace the X, right? So X is that button. So you can store in different letters. That way you have the letters later when you want to check your work. So you can be like, oh, okay, I'm going to do B for this question. So B is equal to 2. And then I'm going to have C equal this for the next question, right? So you're not always overlapping the letter. Tip number 3 is don't be scared of equations, right? So when they give you an equation in the question, that's probably your best friend. You got to use it. So in fact, you could literally just skip reading the question like, oh, I see this. Well, okay, I need to plug in stuff. Well, outside height is equal to 4. Okay, well, h is equal to 4. And then the width is equal to 3. Because I know with these wordy ones, students look at it and it's like, oh, really? But if you get one that just has the equation in it, you can just kind of bypass everything. Same thing for this one over here, right? They give you the equation. It's 3 to the n times e to the negative 3, for those of you who can't see it, over n factorial. It says there are exactly n customers. Always pay attention to your units, right? That way you can match it. Oh, it says there's exactly 2 customers in line. So then all we're going to do is plug in 2, e to the negative 3 over 2 factorial. So how the heck do we plug this into our calculator? So I love this function whenever you have a fraction, right? I go alpha and then y equals, which is f1, right? And I do n over d. N over d is my fraction thingy. So I have literally a fraction in there. I go 3 to the second times e to the negative 3 is 0.05. And then if you want the factorial button, I'm going to put 2, right? To find the factorial button, we go to math, which is under the alpha button. Prob or there, I plugged it in exactly as it is in the equation, right? 3 squared times 0.05 over 2 factorial. Oh, it's backwards on your screen. Is it backwards on everybody's screen? Because then I need to mirror it. Is it backwards on your screens at home too? I can't see anybody right now. Is it backwards for you at home? No, it's not on your computers. How do I flip it on here then? Go to Zoom and then preferences and then there. Is it backwards at home for people at home now if I do that or no? Okay. So now everybody in person can see my calculator correctly then. Great. Any questions on how I did that? And then hit enter, and then I get 0.225, so it's J. So calculators and questions are helpful. Tip number 4, it says use the figures to your advantage, right? So here's how we're going to use the figures to our advantage. This one gives you A is 2, 0 and B is 4, 0, right? So this is 2, 0 and this is 4, 0. So what is the distance from A to B? 2, right? Easy. Everybody can figure that out. Now the question is, what is the length of A double prime, B double prime? What's your guess? Half of that, done. Okay, figures are drawn to scale 95% of the time. I think I've seen 2 or 3 at this point. This is a way for you to check your work. This is a way to verify your work, because maybe you do all the work and do it wrong too, right? Because that happens on the test. Use figures to your advantage. Okay, so there's a long way to do number 57 over here. What is the ratio of ABCD to quadrilateral DCFE? How many of these do you think visually could fit into this? 3. Okay, so 1 to 3. Which one's closest to 1 to 3? Yeah. Okay, there you go. Usually, on the more recent ACTs, I think it can bring it down to 2, right? You should still do the work if you can. But this is a great elimination strategy, right? This is a great time saver. This is a great checker, right? Always check your answers and make sure they make sense in the context of the question. This one stumped me the first time I saw it because I had no idea what a drawbridge was, but they even define it for you. Right, we could do it the long way, but let's use our spatial reasoning. So y'all can use your pencils as like a ruler, I guess. You can put your thumb at the end of it and place it against the 240 to approximate where 240 is. If you use this to approximate where 240 is, and then you overlay your pencil over here, right? I think this is approximately the same length. Right, 240 is here, 240 is here. So how long is question mark? 320, done. Okay, this will work on maybe 1 or 2 questions if they give you the figure, right? This is not gonna save you on the whole test. But it can help you get past 1 or 2 questions. Okay, tip number 5 is plug in numbers, right? So we did plug in numbers earlier, but sometimes you just got to think of what is the most efficient number to plug in. And what are some bad numbers to plug in? 0, 1, right? 0 and 1. And I would almost argue 2, right, is sometimes a bad number to plug in. So then you could literally plug in any other number besides that. And sometimes you want to plug in a number that makes the most sense in the question. So if a dog eats 7 cans of food in 3 days, at this rate, how many cans of food does the dog eat in 3 plus D days? What's a reasonable number for D here that would help you like logically compute it?
3.
I think another 3, right? Because then how many cans of food does a dog eat in 6 days? What would your answer be? 14, right? We can all figure out it's proportional, so 14 cans. So we're going to figure out which one is equal to 14 when D is equal to 3. Obviously, it's not going to be this one because it's going to be a fraction. It's not going to be this one because it's still going to be a fraction. It's not going to be this one because you get a weird fraction, right? 7 over 9. It's this one you plug in 3. It's 3 over 3 is 1. 7 plus 1 is 8. Right? Yeah, so it's K. This is useful for those of you who have trouble setting up equations. Yeah, if you really want to set up the equation, right, it's a proportion. 3 cans over D days, right, is equal to X cans over 3 plus D days. You can do it that way, right? And then cross multiply. But some people don't like setting up equations. Okay, so 57 is another K is an integer. Integer means whole number, right? K is greater than 2. So follow the rules that they give you. So we can let K equals 3. So let's have everybody try to plug this thingy into their calculator and see what they get, right? So you all get the practice, and I'll write it out again so you can try it again. We're going to let K equal 3. And let's have you try to plug it in symbol for symbol. Yeah, what'd you get on your calculator? 4/3, right? If you plug it in. Did anybody not get 4/3? Is anybody having issues with figuring out how to plug it in? All right, alpha F1 and over D. All right, I plugged in 3 for K, so I did the store function, but you can just literally plug in 3 if you want to also, right? Well, yeah, but everybody's at different levels and not everybody is well versed in factorials. So my goal is just to find hacks for people who need hacks. Because obviously, if you know the real way of doing it, that's always preferred. But sometimes your mind also blanks on the test too, right? Or you do the math wrong or something, right? And my goal is to have you make as few mistakes as possible. Easiest way to make the fewest mistakes possible. For this type of question, no. For a question that is this advanced, this is something you really learn in calculus BC, maybe honors pre-calculus. Yeah, plugging in a number. If worst case scenario, it'll lead you down to 2 and then you have a 50-50 shot, right? But I've never seen it be like all 5 of them are so close that you can't figure it out.
What was the answer again?
A, 4/3. And then for those of you who have difficulty with this type of stuff, right? This stuff you can also try plugging in on your calculator. This one would be very time intensive, right? But you could be like, oh, let X equal 3, right? And let Y equal 4. And then plug that in your calculator like this. And then if you want to plug in the root function, right? You go to math and then you go to this one, right? If you want to plug in the 12th root, you go to number 5. And then you can put the number 12 there, right? And you can have the 12th root, 122nd root, I guess. So if you really want to plug in numbers and venture that way. The correct way for those of you who are interested is you get a common denominator, right? So it's 4/12 for this one. Y is equal to 15/12, right? That's a common denominator. So that's how they got the 12th root, right? There's way more Y's. There's 15 Y's out of 12. So how many can we pull out in front? We can pull out 12, 12 out of 12. That's 1 Y. We still have 4 out of 12 here. And then how many Y's do we have left? We have 3 out of 12, right? That addition rule, when we multiply 2 exponents together, we're adding the exponents. So we have a full Y out in front, and then we have the 12th root on the inside, and we have X to the 4th, Y to the 3rd. There's many, many ways you could try to do this. This is just one way. Okay, tip number 6 is proper calculator technique. People mess up all the time when they multiply and divide. Remember the word per means divide, right? So then if we want to take the hydrogen molecules divided by cubic centimeters, then most students will be like, oh, 8 times 10 to the 12th divided by 4 times 10 to the fourth, and write it literally like that on their calculator. Can you all see why that is wrong? Right, we do PEMDAS, we go left to right if we have multiplication and division, right? So literally they're just taking this one and dividing it by this one. Yeah, so if you want to divide quantities, if you want to grab a cube for her, yeah, and you can put the cube in front of her.
Yeah. Or
The hexagon. That's-
Sky, would you be able to put this next to Sean? Awesome.
Okay, so hydrogen molecules per cubic centimeter. So you have two ways of doing this, right? You either put this in parentheses and parentheses like that and write it that way, or you do your alpha F1 function, right? You do the alpha fraction, right? And then write it like this, right? 8 times 10 to the 12th over 4 times 10 to the fourth. Yeah. Please be careful. I've seen another one I've seen people make careless mistakes on is like, oh, I want to do 4 divided by 8 pi, right? And so they literally write it like that, right? 4 divided by 8 pi. But remember, there's an imaginary multiplication sign there, right? So if you're ever dividing, just put your thing either in fraction form or put it in parentheses. No. It does not treat 8 pi as a quantity unless you put it in parentheses. You can literally try, right? You could write this and then write this on your calculator and you see that you'll get different answers. That is a very, very common calculator mistake. So if you happen to do that, just always use the fraction function on your calculator. Yeah, order of operation matters. Yeah, okay. So order of operation matters when you're plugging in on your calculator. And then for 58, 58 is just another one where you could like plug in a number for X and then plug it in for X for all the answers and see which one makes the most sense. Because I don't know how many of you have binomial theorem memorized. Yeah. Okay, tip number 7 is draw, right? When they give you, especially for circle questions, graphing circle questions, or when they give you a figure, right? Sometimes, let's go to this 57 first, right? When you have a circle, what is the best shape to draw inside of a circle? Triangle, right? Circles are made up of infinitely many right triangles. And what we want to do is we always want to draw from the center to some other vertex so that you're connecting. We're connecting the dots here, right? People want to draw the vertex here. People want to draw the vertex here. People want to draw it here, right? But in none of these places does it make a shape, right? So the best place to make a shape is we do it like that. So like that, right? And this is 5. And then the radius is from all points of the circle. How much is the radius of the circle? 7, right? Half of 14. So then we have our right triangle. And it becomes that much easier to do. Right, circles are made up of right triangles. So when you have that, you can draw. And then here, right, there's the math way you could do it and try with the equation of the circle. But we could just also plug in the answers and try all the answers, right? So for example, here A would be -3. Right, so this would be 1 comma -3, 1 comma -3, and this would be -3 comma 3. And when you do that, there's no way you could draw a circle like this, right? With this as the center. And in fact, you try drawing all the points, you get 1 comma 3. And then this would be 3 comma 3. And then you see from this point, this is the center point, right? If you were to go up and over, you'd go up the same amount and over the same amount, right? So this one would make the most sense because it'd be symmetrical with the center. You can try the other points and realize that they aren't really symmetrical with the circle. Questions on either 59 or 57? Okay, tip number 8 goes with plugging in the answers now. When they give you stuff in the answers, you can always plug in the stuff. Because I'm giving you the last few questions, and the last few questions typically defy common sense and logic. So for example, what's a number that we can try plugging in for 57 here? I mean, I try e, right? It says x is equal to 1. And then again, we have the absolute value function. Or we can, this one we can do easily, right? But the absolute value function is in the math num abs, right? Abs is not for a 6-pack, abs is for absolute value. So you can put your absolute value function in your calculator. It's so awkward going backwards. Right, but if you plug it in directly, you can see, hey, wait, hold up. This would be +1 and this would stay -1. Well, that doesn't work. Well, if 1 doesn't work, that also eliminates C, right? Because 1 is a real number, and it would also eliminate B. All right, people get scared and they forget to try plugging in a number, and then you try a negative number, right? So you get x is equal to -1, so then you get -1 is equal to -1. -1 is 1. 1 is equal to 1. Yay. Same for this type of thing, right? This type of thing you're not familiar with in class, well, probably, right? And if it's not something you're familiar with, you can always try plugging in the endpoints and see which ones work and which ones don't work. So for example, you could try at -3, right? If it's an endpoint here, it should be an endpoint there. So -3 plus 1 quantity squared is less than or equal to 4. 3 plus 1 squared is less than or equal to 4. 4 squared is less than or equal to 4. That is not true, right? 16 is not less than or equal to 4. So this one doesn't work, this one doesn't work. So plugging in answers can oftentimes save you a lot of time. Same thing over here, right? If they give you a range of values and you forget the rule for logs, just plug this into a log, right? We have a log button. Where's the log button? It's over here on the side, right? And you can just plug in values on the thing and be like, oh, is my log button? There it is. And try different numbers that are highlighted. For example, try number 2, right? And if number 2 works, then you can eliminate H or K. If number 2 doesn't work, then you eliminate F, G, and J. And similarly, you can do the same thing over here, right, by plugging in for X. So you can also plug in an imaginary number for X. Questions there? Okay. And then question number 9 is know where you are in the tests. Right, because 1 through 30 should be obvious. Maybe there's 1 or 2 that are less obvious. But then we start to get to question 40, 45, 50. That's where either the concept's going to be like an advanced concept or it's going to be a trick question. So here are the easier looking ones. And if you see an easier looking one, we got to be careful. So the length of one side of a square is increased by 25%. By what percent would the length of an adjacent side have to be decreased so that the area of the new figure is the same as the original area? What do people say as the wrong answer here? 25, right? Percentages are not additive. So you can guess values, right? So an easy one to do is like 100 and 100, right? So 100 and 100, 4 zeros, right? The area would be 10,000. So then what would happen if we increase the length of one of it by 25%? 100 becomes 125, right? We want the area to be the same. So then it's just 125 times x is equal to 10,000. And then x would equal 80. So then my answer is K, right? No. They italicized the decrease, right? So we did not decrease by 80%. We decreased by 20%, right? And it should make sense that if you increase by 25%, your decrease should be around 25%, right? It's not going to be a huge decrease. Right? They do trick you with the wording though. So on percentage questions, makes sense to try real values. What about this 60? What's the trick here? This one's starting to get more and more common.
You have to, what I would do is make like a 60 by 60 square and then convert 60 into yards twice and then.
You could do it that way. Like 6 by 60 would totally work, right? So this is feet, right? So 6 feet times 60 feet is 360 square feet, right? And then convert each of them to yards. So divide by 3, right? So this is 2 yards. Divide by 3 here, this is 20 yards. But let me posit this question. How many square yards are in 1 square foot? Or the other way around. How many square feet are in 1 square yard?
Uh, 9.
9 square. Square. 3 times 3 is 9. Yeah. I noticed that even for the highest achieving students, it's the units that get them, right? There's a hidden like month instead of a year, an inch instead of a foot, a millimeter instead of a centimeter. If anything will trip up the highest scoring students, I think it's that. So pay attention to your units. A certain rectangle is 3 times as long as it is wide. Suppose the length and width are both doubled. How does the area of the second rectangle relate to the area of the first? What do people normally say? They say double, right? They say A. It's not A. And it's not B either, right? Because that's the number 3 there. So what happens when you double the length and the width? It's 4 times for area, right? It's 4 times for area. How many times for volume? 8 times. 2 times 2 times 2. And so if you get the conversion from cubic inches to cubic feet, right? There's not 12 cubic inches and 1 cubic foot, right? There's 12 cubed cubic inches in 1 cubed cubic foot, right? Good thing we only live in a 3-dimensional world. If we lived in a 10-dimensional world, the ACT would be much harder. We only have 3
We
dimensions.
technically live in like a 20-something dimension world.
What?
According to like the string theory or whatever, it says we live in like the 20-something.
Wait, really? I thought it limited at like 7 or 8. Is it really 20?
I have no clue. I forgot. Someone told me it was 20.
Oh. I've only heard up to like 10. Interesting. Fascinating. Okay. So these are just all things that are guaranteed to show up on your test. This is based off of an analysis my colleague made. So just know some of these things. And I just threw in some random questions that we can think through. So this one is showing up more often on the ACT science and the math. What's the deal with mixing these solutions? Can we approximate how much it's gonna be? Does anybody have a way of approximating here? It's gonna be less than 10. Explain that, Brady. Uh-huh. Yeah. If we're mixing equal amounts of solution, we're gonna get 10, right? People like to think it's 20, right? They think you can add them, and sometimes 20 is the answer. But then what are we doing? We're mixing more of the smaller concentration, so it's gonna drag down the percentage. Yeah. So on the ACT science, they're not gonna ask you the exact value, but they're gonna be like, what is it approximately? So the answer would probably be between 5 and 10%. What's the actual formula? The actual formula is V1 P1, right? Plus V2 P2 is equal to V total P total. So 120 volume times 0.05 plus 80 volume times 0.15, right? And we can calculate the total volume really quickly, right? 120 plus 80 is 200. And then we just figure out what that final percentage is for the actual math. I think it's actually 9. I think it's 9. No, I think it's 8. Is it 8? Is it 9? Okay. Okay. Linear, blah, 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 picking numbers, blah, 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 quadratic skills, blah, 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 area primitive basic shapes. If you don't know that, please review that. SOHCAHTOA, right? There's going to be 2 SOHCAHTOA questions on the test, plugging in answers. Yeah. Equation for area of a trapezoid, average of the bases. We average the bases, B1 plus B2 times height. Right? If we did the top base, the area would be too small. If we did base 1 times height, if we did the bottom base, it'd be too big. So we average the bases. This one's extremely likely with an over 80% chance. I tend to see that students miss this one quite often. The average sum trick. If you have 5 tests and the average is 80, what is your total score so far? 400, why we multiply together. 5 times 80 is 400. After 6 tests, the average is 82. What's the sum now? 492. We multiply them together, right? The trick for the average questions is always multiply out. Right, we multiply the number times the average. So then we can clearly see what the change was, right? We started at 400, we ended at 492. Yeah, it was a 92 change. Yeah, average questions are very likely done with finding the total sum. You're very likely going to see a MPH question, right? D equals RT. And then they're going to mess you up with units, okay? Minutes, seconds, miles, kilometers, something like that. Pythagorean theorem. What are your triples that you need to know? 3, 4, 5, and 5, 12, 13, right? Those are the most common ones. Anything else, you can just use your calculator, I guess. Apply the formula, right? That's going to be in the question. They'll give you the formula. Probability of 2 independent events. We're going to say independent events. If there's a 40% chance of rain and a 60% chance of tacos, what's the probability of rain and tacos? 24, right? We multiply, has to say independent. This one didn't say independent, so we can't assume that. But on the ACT, it'll either imply or strongly say, right? Imply would be like 2 coins, right? Coins, dice. Not rain and tacos, because I think people eat more tacos when it's raining. Or less, maybe. There's so many taco stands outside. So less tacos when it's raining, fewer tacos. Midpoint, how do we find midpoint? Average, right? Midpoint is the same as average. LCM, that one's very likely going to show up. How do LCM questions present themselves? Least common multiple. Two things are happening at different rates, right? And when will they happen at the same time? You have a light flashing every 4 seconds and a light flashing every 6 seconds. You take a pill every 4 hours and you take another pill every 6 hours. Something like that. Two things are going on at different rates. When do they happen at the same time? They love this one. The remainders. They do it with days of the week and repeating decimals. If 1/7 is written as a repeating decimal, so then people go onto their calculator like 1 divided by 7, and then they get this number, right? They get 0.1428571429. They're like, oh wait, it's not repeating. Is it repeating? Well, that's what my calculator says, right?
Is it just around?
Yeah, it rounds after the 10th, right? So where does the repeating stop? After the 7, right? You can see that, right? It starts at 1,4, right? So this is actually the repeating decimal. So it is a pattern of 6s, right? So if you get this remainder question, there actually is a remainder function on your calculator. So we're going to go to math, num, remainder, math num remainder. It's 0 under remainder. Let me make my screen bigger so the people in the classroom can actually see it. I'm sure you've seen these enough by now to math num remainder. And we're going to do 400, 6, right? We're finding the remainder when we do 400 terms, right? We're finding the 6th. There's a pattern of 6s, right? So what's our remainder? Remainder is 4. So it's the 1, 2, 3, 4th number. The 4th leftover digit is 8. Questions on the remainder? They're going to do it with days of the week, maybe. I's, your pattern of I's, repeating decimal. One time I've seen what was the day of the week 200 days ago. So you did count backwards. All right, these are all remainder theorem. How do we find the median really quickly?
By 2 and add 1.
Add 1 and then divide by 2.
Oh yeah.
If you divide by 2, then you only add a half. Okay, so n plus 1 over 2. And remember, on median questions, will the numbers be organized? No. Do not just assume it's the middle number. If the numbers are in order, I'll give you $5. Counting principle on license plate questions or password questions. What's the trick here? What do you need to remember? Well, there's 26 letters. Yes, you need to remember there's 26 letters. And if they repeat, right? You need to pay attention to repetition or not repetition, right? The other thing that students forget is how many digits are there? 10, right? People think there's 9 digits. People forget 0. 0 is a very lonely number sometimes. Scientific notation on the science section, I'm seeing more and more they're asking you to add 2 numbers of scientific notation. Obviously on the math one you can do on your calculator, right? But they'll do like 5 times 10 to the 7th minus 4 times 10 to the 3rd or something like that. All right, so just move the decimals over and stuff. Add, subtract, multiply, and divides vectors, right? If you get a vector, I remember the first one, if it's positive, it means you're moving to the right. And the J is positive means you're moving up, right? If it's a -9, that means you're moving left. -16 means you're moving down, right? Circle equation, sometimes we got to complete the square. What do we do to complete the square for x squared minus 10x? Half of the number squared, right? Add 25 here. Add 25 here. What do we add here? It's -2 over 2 squared. So we add 1 here, add 1 here. X minus 5 squared plus y minus 1 squared is equal to 36. If they give you the equation, then it's very likely it's better to sketch it, right? You can just. Anybody have questions on this one? Okay, difference of 2 squares, what does x squared minus y squared factor into? X plus y, x minus y, right? Okay. All right. Law of cosines are almost always going to give you the formula. Then you just have to plug things in. So the formula for law of cosines is c squared is equal to a squared plus b squared minus 2ab cosine c. They'll give it to you most of the time. I think this one they didn't give it to you. But we use law of cosines on SAS triangles, right? This is a side angle side triangle. We're solving for this missing side. So this is my missing side C. Therefore, this is my missing angle. How much is my missing angle? 155, right? I have a side angle side, I have the missing angle. I can already just figure out my answers that one without even doing any work if I recognize the law of cosines. All right, law of cosines you use when you have side angle side or side 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 triangles. Okay. I want to jump to some of these tricky questions in a couple of pages, bonus things I want to go over just in case they show up. You might get your recursive sequence where you have S sub n and S sub n minus 1. So you can go through with different values of n. So what happens when n is equal to 1? S sub 1 is equal to 2 times S sub 0 plus 1, right? So I literally just plugged in 1 for every n. What happens when n is equal to 2? S sub 2 is equal to 2 times S sub 1 plus 2 plus 1, right? I plugged in a 2 for every n. And then I just keep going. There's no way of doing this without just keeping on going. Right? 2 times S sub 2 plus 3 plus 1. S sub 4 is equal to 2 times S sub 3 plus 4 plus 1. And literally you just have to go through and plug in, right? It says S of 1 is 3. So it's 2 times 3 plus 2 plus 1 is equal to 6 plus 3 is equal to 9, right? So then I'm going to take this number and now plug it in for the new one, right? So this is equal to 2 times 9 plus 3 plus 1. So this is 18 plus 4 is equal to 22. And so I have to plug this one into the new one. Anybody have questions on how I did that one? For 58, in case you get a matrix question, right, you can always try doing matrix multiplication on your calculator too. If you want to try, this one's going to be the most time consuming one to do on your calculator. Are there ways to plug in matrix though? So it's second matrix. Matrix is this button over x to the minus 1. So I can literally plug in a matrix. I can edit the matrix, right? So for example, I'm gonna try to plug in matrix F, okay? So if I plug in matrix F, remember that's a 2 by 2 matrix. It's 2 rows, 2 columns. 1, 0, 0, negative 1. And so I went to matrix A. I did second matrix, right? I went over to edit. And I did a 2 by 2 matrix. I'm gonna go back to second matrix. I'm gonna edit matrix B now. I'm gonna put this in for matrix B. This is a 2 by 1 matrix, right? There's 2 rows. There's 1 column. There, I plugged that in for matrix B. It's -3, 5. If you forget the rows by columns, you can just try back and forth. So if I plug this in for T and I multiply by that one, I should get 5, 3, right? So then I'm gonna go quit. I'm gonna go back to my matrix, right? Second matrix. And then I'm gonna hit A. And then I'm gonna times it by second matrix B. So I literally just plugged in the matrices and now I'm gonna multiply them together and hopefully I get 5 on top and 3 on bottom. Nope, I didn't. All right, so I know it's not F. Like I said, this one would be a very time consuming one if you don't remember your matrix multiplication. But there is a way of doing that, right? If a question asks you for the determinant of a matrix, you can go also here, right? Math, and then you can find the determinant of matrix. So you can also, if a question asks you for that, you can do that too. For those of you who want to remember the actual way of doing it, I'm going to try G now, right? G, 0, 1, -1, 0, right? So first times the second. All right, remember that in order for you to multiply 2 matrices together, the inner product has to match, right? This is a 2 by 2 by a 2 by 1. This inner product matches, and then I'm going to get a 2 by 1 matrix on the outside, right? The outer product equals that. I'm going to take this first row and I'm going to multiply it by this column. Right, if I do the first row times the first column, I'm going to get 0 times -3 plus 1 times 5. Then I'm going to do the bottom row times that column again. So it's -1 times -3 plus 0 times 5. And when I do that, I get 5, 3, right? So the correct answer is G. I don't think you can. Did you try it on your calculator? Did it work? There's no such thing as matrix division. So I would be surprised if your calculator would actually do that. I'm gonna try and see. That'd be fascinating if you could actually do matrix division. It seems like it would work, but I think matrix operations don't allow you to do that. C divided by B. Yeah, error data type. It wasn't able to do it. Sorry, no such thing as matrix division. "44, Ling asked 11 people, blah, 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 blah. What was the median? The wrong way to do it is to circle the middle, right? That's the wrong way. We do n plus 1 over 2. 11 plus 1 over 2 is equal to 6. And then we count to 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is the median. For this one, we just got to remember what the ellipse equation tells us, right? So what's the center of this ellipse? 0, 5, right? Opposite signs. What does this 9 tell us? It goes 3 to the left and 3 to the right. So the whole axis is 6, right? The whole axis is 6. Up and down, how much? 4 each way, right? So the major axis is 8 units long. So if we're going left and right 3, then this point over here is positive 3 comma 5, and this one is negative 3 comma 5. If we're going up and down 4, it's 0 comma 9 and 0 comma 1. Remembering your ellipses. Number 60, we have our contrapositive statement. So if it is raining, then the parade is canceled. Which of the following is logically equivalent? We do the double negative, we flip it. Right, so if we flip it, if the parade is not canceled, then it is not raining, right? So if A, then B becomes if not B, then not A. In case you get a contrapositive statement there. Literal vector addition. If you want to do vector addition, we do tip to tail. So if you want to do U plus V plus W, you literally stack them in that order. So then it'd be U goes here, right? Plus V, I literally just stacked V over there, right? Plus W. Plus W means this is my final picture, right? U plus V plus W. So if I start here, I end up and to the right. I'm just adding them. But then the question says, I want U minus V. How do I minus? I minus just by going the exact opposite direction. So this is minus V. U minus V plus W. So W. I made this weird figure 4. Either way, I've gone up and to the right. Yeah, I started here at 0, 0, and then I ended up and to the right. And then just throwing this out there, they might throw a weird graph that like freaks you out because like I haven't really covered hyperbolas, I don't think. Does anybody have a hack they think they could do for this one?
Measure the slope of a parabola, like the instantaneous slope, pretty much.
Instantaneous slope, that sounds like calculus. Too much work. Anybody else have a hack for this one? Plug in points, yeah, for sure. You can plug in these points. Is there any other points we can plug in? Origin, it went through the origin. Because I think we can maybe figure out, because we can figure out the center here, right? If the center is 2, 2, right? So then at least we can kind of figure out which ones it's not, right? It's not this one. It needs to be -2, -2, right? And it's not this one, right? And then you should all know by now that the plus is the ellipse, right? So we know it's not D either. If you didn't, it doesn't matter. Let's say you didn't, right? But at least then you plug in 0, 0 to A, B, or D, and then you can figure out which one it is, because you're not required to know a hyperbola on the test, I hope. Ellipses and circles, right? But then on these weird graphs, right, there's always a hidden point you can plug in. All right, that was like our crash recourse in math. Who has questions? Let's take Fiverr and then we'll zoom through the last 2 sections. Yay. All right, we're almost there. We can do it. Okay. What does the reading passage test? So the first one, right? First one is main idea type questions, main idea, main purpose. What do we need to be careful of on these types of questions? Main idea, main purpose. Don't be too specific, right? So 21 is a humanities passage. What do you think would be a good purpose for a humanities passage? Would be a good one. Okay. Any other ones? B, right? A historical overview of the end of the Victorian era. You've done enough of these. Have you ever seen a historical overview of an entire period? I think that the only issue with that one is that one's probably too broad. Obviously, I haven't given you the passage, right? But like literally, oh, I'm gonna tell you about 500 years of history. I don't know. It could be. I think the one is probably not a C, right? But don't be too specific. What about for author's attitude? This one's a really quick one, if you remember how to do this one. Which one do you think would be the best one without reading the passage? Probably, right? We're going to veer positive. Disbelief and cynicism, right? And then boredom and indifference. That's just a bad word. Why are you writing a passage if you're bored and indifferent? Maybe nostalgia, like, oh my God, I miss these days. It could be, right? But I think most likely is going to be A. Great. Number 2, what are these passages? What are these questions, I mean? Specific detail, right? So you either find the line and do it, or you skip it. So most of the time it's going to be word for word, right? According to the passage, Homer felt fascination for the subjects that inspired him at Tynemouth 4a. Spend a summer. What does it say? Hmm. Where do you find many years? Oh, okay. Yeah, that would occupy Homer for many years to come. And then did he return to Tynamouth? You got to find that part, right? He elected to spend the summer. On his return to America, he had elected to leave and relocate to the town. So we don't know if he regularly returned, right? There's no evidence that shows that. Oh, but J. And then according to the passage, Tynamouth inspired Homer to create mainly featured the community of fishermen. The drama of the people who make their living from the ocean. Yeah, because the ocean, not the families, right? So here they kind of use a little bit of changing of the word choice. Question type number 3. Now here, when they give you the line, right? Then this is where they ask you to interpret or paraphrase. So warning, don't be too literal here. Yeah. Why is it C? It says and their families though. B says their families. What, did I misread it? The fisherman's wife. Oh no, it is B. Sorry, I didn't read this. It is B. It was their families, the wives staring out to the sea as they wait for the men. That was my bad for not carefully reading. Don't do what I did. It is B. Here, don't be too literal when they're asking to paraphrase, right? So like an eagle, her words slipped regally down a great distance and struck with awful ease. So anything that was like about like literally being like hit or something would be wrong. I don't have the passage here, so it's hard for you to interpret it. But what about this one though? Which of the following best paraphrases lines 5 through 8? A mind risks real ignorance for the sometimes paltry prize of an imagination enriched. The trick of reason is to get the imagination to seize the actual world, if only from time to time.
E?
B? No.
No, C.
C. Here, one way you can do it is being careful of absolutes, right? So is the best way. I don't know if it's the best way. Nothing says it's the best, right? The imagination lacks value and should be ignored. I never saw the should be ignored part, right? It says it risks ignorance, but ignorance is not the same thing as being ignored. So sometimes they'll do some wordplay on these paraphrase things, right? Is ignorance ignoring? No, ignoring is just I'm not paying attention. Ignorance is like I'm not trying to learn something. So I think that's why a lot of people want to choose A. They see kind of the repetition there. And then, but at the expense of the actual world, at the expense of, that's like, okay, I have to give this up then. They're not saying give up the real world. So what do? Seize the actual world if only from time to time. So at least occasionally is a paraphrase of only from time to time, right? And then rather than become isolated is kind of the paraphrase of that. And then actual world is a synonym or is direct translation of there, right? So C is the best one. Question type number 4, we have nearly asserting and inferred. What are we doing there? Inference, and what do we got to be careful of?
Assumptions.
Assumptions. What else do we got to be careful of? Too specific, too extreme, right? What do you think would be the most broad for number 30 here? I don't like J. Because J's an opinion and assumption, right? She was less valuable than other people. G was a small part of the world, maybe, right? What's another good one? F, right? Generally considered, right? We have those types of worlds, those types of words, right? Generally. And then it still mattered greatly, right? We have these opinion ones. Those opinion ones are harder to prove. You could get really opinionated passages, right? But we want to go for more general language that doesn't make those assumptions. What about 37? What can we infer about the small comet theory? What can we get rid of? Oh.
A and B.
A, and then B, right? Seen as conclusive. I don't think any scientists want to say, oh, I see this as conclusive. Then they get made fun of when they're proven wrong. And then even D, right? Highly criticized by some scientists. I think that's really strong wording. I think scientists would generally caution against other scientists or have reservations about, but you don't want to be the person who's highly critical, right? Then you'll be that person. You don't want to be that person. Number 5, vocab and context, right? Just be careful there. Don't be too dictionary. They're not going to ask you dictionary definitions. Don't be dictionary. What do we got to be careful with the question like number 6? It says, which of the following happened first chronologically? Don't just look at the first line. I've seen it be the first line. But be careful. So when you're reading the passage then, you all need to have your like flashers go off when you see words like what? Before, previously, prior to that, 5 years ago, right? Anytime you see that kind of weird time language, because they love to do like flashbacks and stuff, or flash forwards too. Sometimes they'll be like, you know, which of the following happened last? You know, 10 years from now, he wouldn't know that he would become the first. So just any type of time words, you want to have your flashers go off. Now we have specific purpose of details, right? They say primary purpose. What do we need to be careful of when you have purpose of details? Don't copy paste. But remember, the purpose is not asking you what does the author say. The purpose is asking why is the author saying it. So there's one we can immediately cross out from number 7, which is one that we can immediately cross out.
C.
See, right? We hate the word contradict. And then when you grow up as I did in the great city during what just happens to be its golden age, you think of it as eternal. Always was there, always will be. The grandeur of the metropolis creates the illusion of permanence. The peninsular Bombay into which I was born certainly seemed perennial to me. Malabar and Kumbala Hills were our capital and Palatine. The Braeburn Stadium was our Coliseum. And for the glittering Art Deco suite of Marine Drive, well, that was something not even Rome could boast. What do you think is the best function there? A, right? Literally copy pasted the Rome here, right? And it literally copy pasted the, did it say Art Deco somewhere? Yeah, it copy pasted that, right? So you got to be careful with that. Okay. And then on the comparison passages, right? Especially when you have two, especially if they're written at different times, you want to be as broad as possible. So if you have two humanities passages, which one do you think would be the most broad and could apply to the widest number of passages? Which one? H, allegory? I don't even remember what an allegory is. I feel like an allegory is like a weird like metaphor, isn't it? Isn't an allegory like extended metaphor? I think that's way too specific. J, I literally think you could apply this to almost any passage and argue that it's true, right? Even a science passage, like they still might use sensitive descriptions, right? He pricked his finger. It was as if, right? So J is one, especially on stories. What about 18, which is broad and could most likely apply to two different passages? F, right? They have contributed little that's worthwhile, right? They reveal the author's professional background as a way of lending credibility. Most authors don't do that, right? They don't say like, oh, look at me. I studied for 10 years under blah, 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 right? It's just in the little blurb at the beginning. So F, right? So B, please be careful of assumptions. Please be careful of finding details. Know when to paraphrase, know when to not paraphrase. Okay. All right. We're on to the science. Quick review. What's the independent variable? What you change, right? Which axis? X-axis, right? What you change is the x-axis. What's the dependent variable? What you measure. Usually the y-axis, right? Which one's clean? Which one's messy? Clean, right? You go 10, 20, 30, 40. Dependent. 2.57. Right? Lots of decimal places. What's the constant or control?
What stays the same?
Stays the same, so you can compare. So you can compare the relationship between independent and dependent, right? Usually they'll say something like that, right? You held the temperature constant so you could determine the impact of time on velocity. Where do you find the control variable usually? In the chunk. Find it in the chunk, right? The chunk before the text. Like the little blurb. It says like, for experiment 2, the temperature was 25 degrees, you know. A quick reference, right? Because you could spend forever looking. It's like, it's usually in the chunk before the text. What is direct variation? Both increase or decrease. What's the equation? If x and y are directly proportional.
X is equal to, or y is equal to kx.
Y is equal to kx, right? Inversely proportional as x goes up, y goes down, therefore y is equal to, no, not negative.
A over X?
K over x, right? K is the constant. We could have a negative linear also. You could have, so that's technically inverse, but it's not mathematically. I don't know, this is the one, right? Because direct proportion is this way, right? And then inverse proportion typically goes this way, right? Negative kx would be a straight line down, which you could get. Okay, our 6 different question types, right? Question type number 1 is the data. These are usually the first ones. Remember, the questions go in order of difficulty. You should be able to answer the first 3 or 4 without too much hassle. How do you recognize the answers? Are going to have numbers in answers, right? If you have a number in the answer, you literally just find the graph. Find the correct graph, please. Please find the correct graph. Students miss so often because they just don't do it. So literally, if it says according to figure 2, literally draw until you connect to figure 2. Please do that, or use your finger. Put one finger on the question, put one finger on figure 2. So you are not looking at the wrong graph. Do not let yourself fall prey to like wandering eyes. Do whatever you can to make sure you're looking at the correct thing. And then you also have this thing about, okay, September 15th, right? September 15th, make sure you're looking at the right pattern, and then make sure you're going to the right axis, because sometimes they have an extra axis over here, right? So September 15th is this one. What is this? It's roughly how many megapascals between like 4 and 6? And then maximum value. So maximum value here would be 7 then. And then November 15th over here, right? Draw it down to 20. Make sure you're drawing these straight lines too, right? Do not let your eyes trick you. These are the easiest ones to get right. Find the right graph, draw straight lines, go to the right axis. Sounds simple enough, right? Question type number 2, right? You have your extrapolation. Right? How do you recognize in the answer? You see less than, between, greater, right? Ranges. So on this one, you literally want to draw the extra line. So here it says, based on figure 2, we want to stick in October 1, right? Well, where do we stick in October 1? October 1 falls in between September 15th and October 15th, right? So if we literally want to draw on the line, maybe my line looks something like this, right? So please draw in the line when you see extrapolation questions, or extend the line if you need to. Right, add an altitude of 18. So add an altitude of 18. Well, what is my thingy? Well, my thingy goes to 2, right? Well, where does 2 fall? There, right? Very similar to question type 1. Again, the easiest ways to mess it up is you go to the wrong graph. You don't pay attention to the axis. You don't pay attention to the unit, right? Question type number 3, another easy one, right? It's relationship. And then how do you recognize it? Literally says increase, decrease in the question. My thing, what do? I'm always establishing the relationship early in the passage, right? Before I even get to the question, I draw my arrows, right? Oh, this one's going up. They're going up together. Oh, they're going opposite, right? So you got to check out the relationships early. Yeah, so 1, 2, and 3 are the straightforward ones. You're going to see them in the first 3 or 4 questions. These ones you should zoom through as long as you're careful. Then we get to the hard ones, right? So then how do you recognize this one? Long answers. Now, when you start to get to long answers, right, you want to read the answers to help you. The worst thing you can do is skip over the answer and be like, I have no idea what I'm doing. So these are your hypothesis questions. Right, so the researchers had predicted that decreasing the fruit fly's ability to detect odors would increase its lifespan, right? So it's saying we decrease the ability and then we increase the life. And then if we look at the answers, right, the answers are asking us to look, oh, let's look at strain N. Let's look at strain X, right? It's telling us to compare strain X with strain N. I don't know if I would have known how to do that if I didn't read the answers, right? So the answers should help facilitate where to look. Also tells you results of study 3, right? These are usually the 4th or the 5th question, right? The questions start getting longer. So then you got to start using the answers to your advantage. Question type number 5 are procedural questions. Right, and how do you recognize? They ask about procedure, right? They say why or how, right? Anytime they're asking why are they doing this or how are they doing this, what do? You go back to the passage. Every other question up until now, you look at the data first, right? Data, 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 data. When they start asking how or why, then you look at the text. You do not need to read the text right away. Second is you can use common sense too. A lot of the procedural questions are based on true scientific methods, scientific experiments. Do y'all remember who's gonna lie to you? Scientists won't lie to you. Students lie to you, right? Students give bogus responses. If it's a scientist, we can believe them. So for example, for this number 39, why would you dry the soil core sections? Which one do you think makes common sense here? C, right? You do not want it to easily be separated. That makes your life hard, right? C, right? So you could easily separate it. 40, at each of the 3 sites, the grass plot and the shrub plot were adjacent next to each other. This arrangement ensured that which of the following variables could be assumed to be nearly identical for both plots. What makes most sense here? Climate, right? We want to keep climate constant so we avoid that lurking variable, right? So these are ways you can like catch up on time, right? So then you can spend time on the more complicated ones. And then 6 is outside knowledge / trick. How to recognize, it's usually the last question or second to last question, right? One or the other. What to do? Beware of one-step answers. If you're on the last question of a passage and you're like, oh, I found it, you're probably doing it wrong, right? Oh, I found it, I need to double it. Oh, I found it, I need to subtract 10, right? Oh, I found it, I need to do something else with it. One-step answers do not work for the last question. So I included an outside knowledge one. So take a look at that and tell me which one you think is the best. G?
G.
Yeah. The force is the greatest, G. Outside knowledge, right? Gravity is constant, basically constant around Earth, right? Roughly between 9.81 and then maybe 9.79 when you're at the top of a mountain or something. Yeah, but gravity is constant on Earth. Okay, so that's kind of the progression of each passage roughly, right? Easy to hard. And then just some simple outside knowledge ones. So for example, units here, what do we got to remember for density? What is density?
Mass over volume.
Mass over volume. Indium density 7.31 grams per centimeter cubed, right? If we don't write anything here, it's implied 1, right? Each gram. No. Yeah, no, not that one. Each centimeter. Yeah. These are some of the last questions I've seen, right? So some of them are simple, in which you just have to do dimensional analysis. Right? Which dimensional analysis work? This one works, right? They cross cancel. This one doesn't work, right? They don't cross cancel. This one works also, right? And then this one doesn't work. So sometimes it's that simple. Here's another type of last question, right? Grams, they're nice here, not milligrams. They don't even have to put that one there, right? So gotta pay attention to this one, right? Suppose that the actual concentration was 43. So then how do you determine percent error? You all remember the percent error formula? It's the observed value, right? The measured value minus the theoretical over the theoretical, right? So where do you think actual goes in? Do you think if it's actually 43, do you think that goes into the first observed or it goes in the second theoretical? That's what I thought too. But the actual means the true value. The true value is 43. Yeah, the true value is 43. Actual means the true value, not the one you measured. Theoretical is the one you're calculating, the one that's supposed to be the true thing based off of math and science, right? So I, for the longest time, was like, why isn't it this one? Right, but then it turns out that the actual is the true theoretical value is what they're trying to say on this question. The theoretical value, so this one's the correct answer. Actual, the real one, not the one you measured. So you're off somehow. I know, it confused me too. You calculated it wrong, right? The true value is 43. So you were off. So you put the off value first. Yeah. This one says, this one's really easy if you know how to do the dimensional analysis, right? It says newtons per meter squared. So what's the answer? Yeah, right. So sometimes if you just look at the units, it can help you answer them quickly. Just some random things, right? Genotype and phenotype. So here in the table, we see that trait R is present when there are only lowercase alleles, right? So is trait R a dominant trait or a recessive trait? It's recessive trait, right? It only appears when you have the recessive alleles. And then they'll ask you to do like Punnett squares sometimes. Suppose that individuals 20 and 21 have a biological child. Gene R is not located on the X chromosome or the Y chromosome. All individuals with trait R inherited 2 copies of the little r allele. So both of these have the recessive trait, right? So if 2 people with the recessive traits mate, then what's the likelihood that their child will have the trait? 100%, right? If there are 2 homozygous, right? Homozygous, they'll use that phrase sometimes, right? Homozygous recessive. Let's pick a few more to go over. Let's look at this picture on the next one. So they give you this equation, right? And they assume that Earth, planet X, and planet Y have equal radii. So this is the same, right? So then which planet will have the greatest mass? Look at this graph, and this graph is little g. So if we want the greatest mass, then what do we want for little g? Do we want the greatest little g or the least little g? Greatest. They're on opposite sides of the equation, right? If we make this side really big, then this side of the equation also has to be really big. It's the same idea as y equals kx, right? They're directly proportional. So g and m are directly proportional, right? So which one has the greatest g? Earth, right? So this is a way they could ask a direct variation question a little bit more confusingly. Versus here, if they ask for radius, right? Little g versus radius would be opposite because radius is in the denominator. Just a few things you need to know, right? Simple things: photosynthesis, plants; cellular respiration, animals, things that breathe oxygen, right? What about pH? What's the pH neutral? 7, right? So if something's yellow, it is acidic, right? And if something's blue, what's the word for blue here? If it's above 7.6, basic or alkaline. Energy-rich molecules, ATP, right? What's another word for starch? Huh? Carbohydrates, yeah. What's another word for amino acids? Proteins, DNA, nucleotide maybe. They'll say genetic material. I don't know, they say something genetic. Anybody remember what CH4 is? Methane. And then does methane cool Earth's climate or warm Earth's climate? Warm, right? Cow farts warm the atmosphere. C. sapidus is a crab. Z. marina is a seagrass. So what can you tell me about the cells then? C. sapidus, does C. sapidus have a nucleus? Yeah. So it could have a nucleus. Does C. sapidus have a cell wall? No, right? So C. sapidus lacks a cell wall, whereas Z. marina does have a cell wall. Plant cells also have nuclei. Genus and species, right? How do we determine genus versus species names? Genus is the first one, right? Species is the second one, right? And then on the passage, they'll just abbreviate the genus name. E. histolytica, this is an amoeba. What do you think about an amoeba? They didn't give you any information. They just said it was an amoeba. Has a nucleus, unicellular. Who knows what kind of cells don't have nuclei? Germs? No, prokaryotes. Eukaryotes have the nuclei, prokaryotes don't. I don't think they'll ask you if a germ has a nucleus or not. S. lycopersicum and C. annum, bell peppers and tomatoes required water for which of the following processes? They're bell peppers and tomatoes. Required water for which of the following processes? Oh, they gave you no more information other than the fact that they were. All the passages was tomatoes and bell peppers. D. What is D? Photosynthesis, right? Yeah, I think had they asked like what is like photosynthesis versus cellular respiration, people would have been like, oh, okay. But of course, they had to say photosynthesis in the most abstract way possible.
And you take that.
There's like 2 minutes left. It's fine. No, you can leave. We'll just do a couple more just so you're aware. So then, just so you're aware of the vector thingy, right? So they're asking about cable 2. Cable 2 is pointing to the right. Can you all figure out which one of these is saying pointing to the right?
E.
Yes, pointing to the right, yeah. So some of those are that easy. Let me see if there's anything else I would do. Let's look at this one for the last one, then I'll answer any questions you might all have. Which of the following procedures would best test student 2's explanation with current flowing through the cables? So it says each current generated a magnetic field. So which one would best test the fact that each current generates a magnetic field? G. If it's an uncharged rubber strip, uncharged means it has no charge, right? So it would neither be attracted nor repelled by the thing. And then compass needles are attracted to magnets or magnetic fields. That's why. That's just an outside piece of knowledge you need to have. Honestly, I don't know what's going to show up for your outside knowledge, and I'm sure you're all smart enough to figure those. But remember, those come up in the last questions, right? Don't go searching for answers if they're on the last one, and because they might not be there. All right. Who has questions or thoughts about Saturday? Yeah. It's a negative X value, so it's, oh, wait. D. I'm sorry, negative X is pointing to the left. Thank you for clarifying. Positive X is pointing to the right. If it's pointing to the left, the thing would like collapse, right? Tension opposes the direction of motion, right? So you have this the other cable pointing up and to the right is pointing to the left, right? So this cable is pointing to the left. So you need something to oppose the motion. Anybody else?
For the reading, if there's like if there's two passages, should you spend like a little bit more time on the two passage one and then try
I
and
don't
save
think
time on
it's
the other?
necessarily more. I think you can do it by, I read the first passage really quick and I do the first passage questions. And I read the second one and do that. Maybe it takes like 30 seconds more. I don't think so, though. What were you asking, Sky? On the back? I don't even have my answers right now. Oh, the back one I think is I think it's F. Yeah, it's F. Who else has questions? Okay, so then I'll post the video of today's stuff and then I'll post another video of the grammar stuff. So in case you need to review the grammar stuff. All right. Alrighty. Good luck, everybody. If you need questions, you can post them in the Discord chat.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck,
Thank you.
everybody.